Welcome everyone to another edition of First Person, sponsored by the Ruin Camp Farm Drainage Company in Fort Loramie. 80 years of experience, farm, commercial, and residential. If you got wet fields, if you got a wet yard, if you just feel a little clammy yourself, call Phil Barhorst at Ruin Camps. They can help you out. They'll make water work for you. As you can see over my shoulder, our venue this week is the 86th Annual State Boys Baseball Tournament. Our guest is Jerry Snodgrass. Those up Findlay Way will be very familiar with Jerry. He's Deputy Commissioner of the OHSAA and Supervisor of all things high school baseball, which I particularly appreciate. Jerry, I always say this, I like to say this, you guys do state tournaments as well or better than anybody, and I particularly enjoy the way you do baseball.
I appreciate that. You know, number one, with school experience, having been a former coach, having been a former athletic director, you know, I checked my ego at the door years ago, and you really learn why you do what you do, and you do it for, you know, the 18 players in each one of these dugouts down there. And I think that's when it rubs off and it shows that way. They're memories that they'll carry for a lifetime.
We have about 10 minutes to cover here and a lot of things to cover, and as always when we have an opportunity to sit down and talk with Dr. Ross, I try to bring some questions from home from people who are baseball fans, high school baseball fans, and one of the first things I want to ask you about is the topic that I talked about with Dan Ross about 5 years ago. I write all the time, and you may have read some of my comments on Press Pros about the miserable conditions we ask kids to play baseball and softball for that matter in. And 5 years ago, he made the comment to me, we are studying other models like the state of Iowa, who starts baseball on the 1st of May, and it culminates with their state tournament about the 4th of July, to see if we can do a better job in that respect, how we can do it, and how it will impact different people. Tell me where that stands, if it stands at all, 5 years after that.
You know, and it's interesting, and I go back to the, as an administrator of a sport, I still have a coach's mentality, and I think a coach's mentality, you always have to look at what could go wrong. You always have to look at things, you always have to look at the unintended consequences of doing things. And I myself have looked at that. I get very frustrated when we're in the middle of baseball. This year, 2013 was as tough, I think, regular season-wise as any year we've had. We had more suspended games than I've ever heard of. We had more suspended games where pitchers would get their innings back 7 days later, making up a game. So a kid that was normally out of innings for a game, you know what I'm talking about, a very unusual situation. So I look at that and say, there's got to be a better way. Now here's the negative side, not maybe unintended consequences, but one of the biggest things, and it's probably more of an opinion, not backed by a whole lot of fact, and I'm aware of that, is in Ohio, summer baseball, I mean, it's a coined phrase all in its own, summer baseball. Whether it's Legion, whether it's Acme, depending upon what part of the state you go to, regardless of what it is. Even the word travel baseball that's down into the freshman level, so on and so forth, has such a foothold, and a good foothold. Yeah. I think baseball
is a good thing.
It is. I think baseball in its non-interscholastic venue is as good as any sport there is. And I think baseball coaches in Ohio offer a lot to it. It offers a lot to high school baseball. And I think the infringement on that would be a tough thing to do, to impede on what's already there in established programs. You might notice even last year, I changed our off-season regulations, which many viewers may not understand, but changed the off-season regulations to allow kids to play as a team beginning May 24th. No other sport gets to do that. They get to do that because of the number of Memorial Day tournaments. And even there, it's infringed on the high school season a little bit to some degree. We have a lot of give and take in that. And I think it would be a tough sell to do that. Not impossible, but a tough sell.
So the short answer is no.
You got it.
Come around.
That's right.
In 5 years. And yet I do know that there's other states who have later seasons, and they tell me they get along. They make Legion in high school or Acme in high school work together, apparently, however they do it.
And I think the biggest thing we would have to do, and that this is where we would have to go, is look at our non-interscholastic regulations and making those two mesh.
All right. A couple other things that I want to cover with you. One, the issue of the BB Corps bat. came about, what is it, 3 years old now?
Yes.
Not second or third year?
It's third year of, yes.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about, it is it's an aluminum bat that just doesn't have as much firepower behind it.
Correct.
They dampened the thing down a couple of years ago, and I agree, for the safety of pitchers, both softball and baseball, it's a good thing to do. But yet, I see 30, 40, 50 high school baseball games a year where a kid just hits the snot out of a baseball and it travels 270, 75 feet. Enough to the point where coaches say it's unfair. If we're going to deaden down the bat, that's fine. We have to have a better baseball. Now, I know college baseball in the NCAA, this is going to become a big issue here in a couple of years because there's already some outspoken coaches in the SEC. I know Greg Beals has spoken about it here at Ohio State. I'm going to ask you, is there the opportunity to have a more fair, livelier baseball for high school baseball here in Ohio?
You know, and it goes to a bigger picture of the difference between the collegiate sport and the high school sport. Most people probably think that collegiate rules for the game of baseball are the same as high school, and they're not. There's a pretty distinct difference, and obviously a bigger difference between college, high school, and professional.
Okay.
But given that, I don't see a change in the baseball. I don't really see that. I think so much is safety oriented in the high school realm. Vice versa of that, I see so many coaches, hear so many coaches welcome small ball back. That it's a better game today than it was. So really a 50-50 argument in my eyes. It may be overwhelming one way or the other that I don't hear.
I just talked to one of the best pro scouts in the business here. That's Gene Bennett from Portsmouth, was here this morning. Asked him the same question. He says something's got to be done, Jerry, because we can't look at kids and decide how much power, what their potential is, because when you hit it hard and it goes 270 feet, what's that tell about the kids?
And you know what, that's an interesting thing that again, many people don't necessarily agree with, and I'm not here for the debate of that, but why high school sports exist. It is not to turn them into professional athletes. And a lot of people might disagree with that, because obviously many kids go on to play, but by the same token, it's for the safety and the well-being and everything else. And I think that's what keeps the high school game, the 98 to 99% of kids that do not go on to play at another level, that most of the rules are centered toward those 98 and 99% versus the 1 to 2%.
All right,
again, right, wrong, or otherwise, it's kind of what it is.
All right, I got a safety issue that doesn't matter where you go. And I think you might know what I'm going to ask you here, because I hear increasingly from high school coaches, they don't say it to you, but they'll mutter about the fact of how do we protect our pitchers better. I see high school hitters here, I've seen it for years, I see it in the college game, hanging out over home plate without any fear of being hit. Now, when I pitched 35, 40 years ago, you didn't do that.
We all know the answer to that.
The answer to that is you throw inside, you knock those people on their can, you get them off the plate, you make them respect the outside corner. You can have the inside part of the plate, I want the outside. Now, everything has been done to legislate safety in the baseball. I understand that. You can't throw at hitters. If you do, I got issues with ejections and suspensions. I got issues with play at second base, at home plate, because we've made the game very soft in comparison to the way it used to be.
Right.
I understand safety. I appreciate safety. But you got to do something for pitchers out there who are throwing the ball 85 miles an hour, and the hitters have no fear, and they're sending the back through the middle at 120 miles per hour. Tell me a little bit about what you think about my argument. Let's loosen them up at home plate a little bit.
You don't hear me say this too often, but I don't really have a good answer. I really don't. It's hard to go against anything safety-wise. It's hard to even come across and promote in any way, shape, or form that it's okay to throw at a batter. I couldn't do that. Is it part of the game? Probably always been part of the game of baseball.
Oh, it always has been.
It has been part of the game of baseball.
You'll remember Drysdale and Gibson.
Yeah, exactly. And our generation does remember, and it's still there to a great degree. How do we do that in the high school realm?
Well, the one thing that I see a lot of umpires who assume because you do throw inside, you're throwing at a hitter. That's not necessarily true. And throwing inside doesn't mean that you're throwing to the inside half of the plate, although that's the way it plays out now.
And I do think, and that's probably a good point. I think I think we've had huge advances. Now, I realize at the time that we're taping this that we've only had one game here at the state tournament, but it was a well-played game, but it was extremely professionally umpired. We have 4-man crews. We've done so much to work on the mechanics of that. Now, when I say that, that simply means I think we're doing a better job of educating our coaches, our umpires, to understand the difference between the guy that's throwing inside and the guy that's throwing
at your head.
Exactly. And I think that might be the answer to that. I think, you know, we are increasing every single year the number of non-school coaches that are coaching every one of our sports. Educating them. The difference in that. I mean, it's okay to do one thing. It's not okay to throw at your head. It's not okay to do something with intent to hurt. And I think if we can keep educating that, I think the big game of baseball will improve, continue to improve. And I think maybe that will bring that element back into it a little bit.
Well, the element of safety, I want you to think more about those pitchers and less about the hitters.
There you go.
And every old pitcher is going to tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
Jerry Snodgrass, the Deputy Commissioner of the Ohio High School Athletic Association, a good friend to high school sports and high school athletes everywhere in the state of Ohio. And Jerry, there's so much more, and I promise you we're going to do this again.
It's good.
I got a Bible of questions. I've got a stack of things that we could talk about.
I'm never short for answers.
No, you're not. And it's a great sport, and it deserves to be talked about as much as you're willing to promote it, and I appreciate that.
It does, and I have to say in the short time that I have that one of the things that we're so blessed with are nearly 800 coaches in Ohio that give their time to do what they do for kids. One of the coaches told me in the games here already that he said, we have more kids that play baseball today for the love of baseball versus kids that were maybe playing baseball because they were football, basketball players and they'll play baseball. We have more kids today playing baseball because they're baseball players and the love of the game, and I think that speaks volumes for what our coaches.
And I could not agree with you more. Jerry Snodgrass of the OHSAA, that wraps up this edition of First Person, again sponsored by the Ruin Camp Farm Drainage Company in Fort Loramie. Call Phil Barhorst if you have issues of wet fields and wet yards, whatever it be, they can make water work for you. Call them there on Dawson Road in Fort Loramie. For Jerry Snodgrass and our sponsors, thank you again for your support of high school sports through PressProsMagazine.com. We'll see you next time on another edition of First Person.